to Julie, and she's going to introduce our next speaker. Julie?
Merci beaucoup, Zahira.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jolene. Very nice presentation. I would like to introduce our second speaker, Brittany Cormier. Brittany works with the Alliance of the Petitcodiac Watershed since 2018. She is a passionate of the environment as responsible for projects. She works with the monitoring of the water quality in the Petitcodiac Watershed, as well as the management of rainwater. So welcome, Brittany. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Julie. Can everybody hear me okay? Cool. I am so thrilled to be presenting today. This is very exciting for me. I am so overwhelmed to be included and with such a great team today. So I will be talking about my favorite things, rain gardens and plants. Though I'll be speaking English for this presentation, I tried to include as many bilingual slides as I could. I hope they're helpful to follow along, and I'm happy to make these slides available after today. So today we'll be discussing techniques for creating rain gardens. I know time is of the essence, so I will very briefly introduce myself, where I work, and my super cool colleagues at the PWA. The Petitcodiac Watershed Alliance is an environmental non-for-profit organization whose projects are run by a small but mighty team of individuals dedicated to the environment and to working outdoors during the summer. I love my job, and I could talk about it forever if you let me, but today I'll keep it brief. So we carry out our activities at the PWA under 4 projects. Our water quality monitoring project has been ongoing for 23 years, with data collected at 21 sites in the Petitcodiac and Memramcook River watershed. Our Broken Brooks project assesses and improves habitat connectivity for fish and other aquatic species, which often has us spelunking in many urban culverts. Our freshwater mussel surveys collect data on the abundance and biodiversity of freshwater mussel species in our watershed, including our local species at risk here, the brook floater. Oh, Soderby, if you wouldn't mind just putting to the next slide, so sorry. To gauge the overall health of our streams and rivers. And Water Guardian, the project I will be representing today, partners with municipalities and homeowners in our watershed to create green infrastructure, to improve stormwater management, and provide flood mitigation. If anyone has any questions about what we do or anything else from today, I will also share my email, and I'm happy to have a chat anytime. So the quick flash was the Petitcodiac Watershed, my office. So we cover an area, a really big area, and a beautiful area in southeastern New Brunswick, where we try to maintain and enhance the ecological services within the watershed. So we're tucked close to the Bay of Fundy. So on to rain gardens. They are a very popular type of green infrastructure. Rain gardens are a landscaped, shallow depression, typically 4 to 8 inches deep, made up of water-loving native flowers, grasses, and ferns. They mimic natural habitats such as wetlands. Rain gardens are designed to capture, store, and release filtered water back at a slower rate to groundwater reserves, streams, and lakes. They are nature-based solutions to stormwater management, and they mitigate flooding impacts. They are cost-effective, efficient, beneficial to pollinators and wildlife, and just beautiful. This next slide is just, well, it's not an acid cloud of rain, which one of my colleagues said yesterday after I had finished. My career in visual arts is over, I guess, before it started. But this is just to give you an idea of what a cross-section of a rain garden would look like. It's an example of a topographic layout of a rain garden and the typical levels of moisture. And we work with the water cycle to install these projects and maintain them and gauge how they're doing. This is the natural rhythm we work with to manage stormwater and flooding. Rain falls onto land, flows into tributaries that drain into rivers and evaporate from surface water, or evotranspire through trees and vegetation. Water also percolates down to groundwater reserves through the soil. Rain garden techniques rely on understanding this process. I know you all must be familiar with this, but it's always helpful to just go over it very briefly. So now I would like to ask you all to give me a bit of an insight on what your ideas are of stormwater management. So if you could please answer in the poll everywhere, in your opinion, what are some impacts of poor stormwater management? Yep, flooding, pollution, huge. This is so cool. Wow, so many answers. I really wanted to use this poll everywhere specifically because it's just organized so nicely. Wow, sedimentation, yes, absolutely. Garbage, for sure. Runoff, plastic pollutants too, yeah. I see just water. I'm sure that's with another word, but that's great. Erosion, yes. So many answers trickling in. Thank you so much, everyone. Closures, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah, we can move on. But thank you so much for all of these answers. This is the biggest feedback I've gotten on the poll everywhere so far. So yes, all of those are correct. All of you have a very good grasp of the importance of stormwater management and what the impacts can be if it's poorly managed. So I just have a few here that were off the top of my head and in my experience. In the greater Moncton area, we have the challenges to adapt to climate change and improve the pollutants we receive in our natural streams and rivers due to anthropogenic pollutants carried by runoff directly into bodies of water. But we also have the extra challenge of combined sewer overflow in many areas of downtown that can only hold up to a certain capacity of water, then release it directly into main tributaries or the Petitcodiac River itself. Spring is when we receive the most runoff here due to a combined snowmelt and rainfall. We have unique challenges to deal with here in southeastern New Brunswick. With warmer spells in winter now as well, we're seeing an increase in ice and a decrease in snow, which can lead to the increase in runoffs during the spring snowmelt and ice jamming. Poor stormwater management in urban areas can lead to surface runoff, catching all different kinds of pollutions, whether it's nutrient pollution, whether it's hazardous materials from parking lots, driveways, or plastic and garbage, frankly. that will break down, and plastic will stay in the environment for hundreds of years, and carry them to local streams and river systems, flooding, droughts, the degradation of infrastructure, so closures I saw there. In rural areas, this can lead to poor riparian zones, loss of land, nutrient overloads in streams that can decrease the available dissolved oxygen for aquatic species, causing large die-offs of fish and other aquatic species, macroinvertebrates, and loss of habitat corridors and biodiversity, which can have very disastrous impacts on things you frankly sometimes don't consider. So I will go into further detail during the site analysis breakout session later, but let's start on rain gardens. So where do you start? First, you'll need to find an area in need of stormwater management and flood mitigation, not usually in an area that pools for more than 48 hours. I know those are areas that need to be improved, but they'd need bigger projects. You don't want your starter plants to get root rot and not be able to grow to their potential. The soil content also matters. If you have an area that is mostly clay, like ours, the water will be held in the soil longer in the top layers. You can test soil content by hand, by wetting it and ribboning it, if you're familiar with that. It's very easy, very fun if you like to get your hands dirty, which I do. Your garden should also be 10 to 30% the size of its contributing drainage area. What impervious surfaces are nearby? A roof, parking lot, or driveway? You can also dig a test pit to monitor the infiltration rate. So, creating a good rain garden can sometimes be as simple as working with the right ingredients. The next slide we have is the soil recipe handed down to us by our neighbor watershed group, EOS Eco Energy, who works out of the Tantramar Marsh. So this recipe is consisting of 70% sand, 15% compost, and 15% topsoil. We have a lot of clay in our soil here, like I mentioned, so we will tend to take this out and introduce the sandy soil mixture to encourage water to infiltrate into the ground. Our next slide is the biodiversity of plants. So the biodiversity of plants are key in creating an effective rain garden. I've created a list of species we use here at the PWA, but the best species will depend on which are native to your region, are available at local nurseries, are water loving, and bloom at interchangeable times of spring, summer, and fall to attract pollinators and other wildlife. I can't stress enough how beneficial it will be for you to use as many native species as you have available to you. They have adapted to your climate and will have higher survival rates. It just makes sense to me. So next, I would like to stress that it is important during rain garden projects to stay organized. These are some pictures from a garden we installed with the Riverview Boys and Girls Club last year, pre-COVID-19. I love this picture on top, especially because those kids were so excited to be delegated the job of watering the plants. They were our trusty water brigade, if you will. All they wanted to do was water the plants, and they were so eager to know what they were doing all day. Rain gardens can be excellent active learning experiences if you have volunteers, but also to teach your staff about what you're doing if you take on one of these projects. Getting the materials, equipment, and people in order can save time and effort in completing rain garden projects. It can be difficult to get the materials in order on time. Some, like soil, can depend on if it's rained. They can't make the soil in the machines. They can't put it in the dump trucks, but try and do your best to adapt. And Of course, the planting will also need to adapt to the weather. Sometimes the weather will not always be your friend. Plan storm dates. Do not plant in droughts or huge rain events. Adapt. In Eastern Canada, a main hazard associated with climate change is the increased risk of higher intensity and more frequent storm events, and increased risk of flooding. Knowing where you're vulnerable to huge flood impacts can tell you where not to build a small-scale rain garden. Knowing your flood map, or flood zones and flood map, is very important. So on this next slide here, I have a map of downtown Moncton. In these low-lying areas that are highly vulnerable to constant flooding, larger rain gardens can be of benefit with an overflow pipe and underground system in place for extreme floods. But these are not areas in which you would like to build smaller GI structures and rain gardens. So this is just a map of the 1 in 100-year floods. And the A and B refers to residential areas in downtown Moncton that are very susceptible and are very vulnerable to constant yearly floods and extensive damage. And the next slide, we have a cross-section of the Centennial Rain Garden. This was my baby. I started and was given the Centennial Rain Garden project, and it is to this day one that I am still very proud of. So this project was in partnership with the City of Moncton in the Centennial Park here in downtown Moncton. They had a new project to create a Centennial Beach location, so a pool, and next to it we were given the go-ahead to build a massive rain garden. So we had engineers on this. Hélène Aucoin, the Director of Engineering or Environmental Management and Engineering, was leading this project and helped us immensely. When you work with municipalities or larger budgets, you can make excellent plans to weave green infrastructure with gray. So this project, we used 2 culverts and an overflow pipe to build our garden ready for a 1 in 100-year flood. And next, I just have a picture of the Centennial Beach design from the Marco Group. You can see the rain garden over to the right. They didn't really know how it would look, so they just kind of made a little horn. But I assure you, it's more beautiful than that. So this project experienced the same delays as the beach did that year, with a combination of a heat wave making most work impossible for most of the summer, and extreme rainfall in the fall that made conditions similarly hopeless to finish the 2 projects. With stubbornness and long days, we completed them both around October. So next you can see the pictures of the progression. Oh, sorry, that's where the rain garden is. But the next slide, thank you. You can see here we have, let's see, I'm trying to remember. So the first one, the big one, is showing the overflow pipe in the middle. And this is when we realized we needed more soil. There was a lot of that mixture of soil in this garden particularly. I want to say off the top of my head 7 tons, but it was a lot. So it will really help infiltrate into the ground. And you can see some standing water on the top right there. That concerned me before we put the plants in. And I was starting to rethink different aspects of the project, but it was gone by the next morning. So that's when I knew that with a few tweaks, it was going to work. So Green infrastructure grows stronger and more effective over time, but the initial year will be the hardest. Installing rain gardens in years with extreme rainfall events and/or droughts will be difficult. Account for these in your planning by ensuring minimal maintenance for the first year and making sure to use native plants that can adapt better to this climate and those conditions. And you can see the sign there to the bottom left. We designed that after we were finished installing the plants. That rock design was actually made off the top of, on the top of her head by my project manager, who is amazingly artistically talented. Some people are just good at everything, that's fine. So the sign, we also did some watercolors of the plants that you would find in the garden. I highly recommend a visit if anyone is around the city. And in summary, please build a rain garden. Each one is unique. They are effective in long-term stormwater management, and they really are beautiful, and they'll surprise you every year. I enjoy visiting the Centennial Rain Garden a lot. Just to see how the plants are doing, how they're growing, how it's tackling rain and doing its job. And it's really fun to grow up with. So I just have a few points here on this slide. And I know we're running a bit early on time, but I'm happy to take any questions or maybe talk about your experiences. But thank you for your interest in rain gardens and green infrastructure. So on the next slide, I just have a quick thank you to the funders of my projects and all the others at the PWA. I would like to thank our funders who help us continue projects like these. And you can follow us on social media to learn more about our projects and get cool pictures. If anyone has any questions, you can fill them out in the chat. I'll do my best to answer you. And I am also happy to answer questions over email or stay later into the break if necessary.
Thank you so very much, Brittany. You did a fantastic job explaining everything. And yeah, you should be proud of that rain garden. It looks fantastic. I do have one question, and I'm not sure which slide this is asking about, but the question is, are percentages by weight or volume? I think it was on one of your early slides when you mentioned Ecos Energy around that period. So if you want to scroll back if you need to.
That is a very good question. I'm just going to scroll back onto the slides. Oh, no, that would be by volume.
Perfect, great. So that's Susan. I hope that answers your question. The next question I have is by Remy Donnel, and he's saying, will the municipality do weeding and maintenance of the Centennial Rain Garden?
That is a very good question, Remy. So the city was hesitant to do any maintenance of weeding or any maintenance of the rain garden, but depending, I have called upon them to give me a hand because I've been overseeing the maintenance of the Centennial Rain Garden myself during this year, so the first year that it's getting established. Just because some weeds I want to keep. So we've got, I know, I'm a big fan of naturalized areas, which is not everybody's taste, but it is mine. So we have a few clover species that have found their way into the garden. I am happy to keep those because they are nitrogen fixing, they're beautiful, they taste like peas, they're a source of food. We also had some more local asters find their way into the garden as well. So I would like to keep them. So I would rather not somebody pick those.
I don't blame you. I'm probably on the same page as you, but anyway.
That's reassuring.
The next question is, how are you preventing clogging in your overflow pipe during the fall leaf off? And you've probably already experienced that.
That is a very good question. Thank you guys at Kind of Cases. This is a good one. So we are experiencing a lot more clogging in the culverts than the overflow pipe. It is a really good question. I'm not sure if it's because the trees are at the right distance, the older trees that in the back area, that the leaves aren't finding their way to the overflow pipe as easily if they fall. And whatever is coming out of the two culverts that feed water into the rain garden is what leaves will come there is stuck in the stones that we have placed. Okay. So they're breaking down near the area of the outflow of the culvert, which is an issue that I'm going to have to figure out a solution to. But thank you for your question.
No, great question. Absolutely. The next one is just a comment that was awesome. Want to build 1 million rain gardens now. So Sarah, thanks for that comment. I'm sure Brittany appreciates it.
Yeah. If you want any advice, I'm available. I love rain gardens. Please,
excellent.
All of them.
Keepeng says, what are the indicators that we can use to monitor the effectiveness of the Centennial rain garden?
Also a very good question. Thank you, Keepeng. To monitor the effectiveness, we are trying to develop a way to survey how well and effective it is working. For now, I have been visiting it in large storm events and seeing how fast the water is infiltrating, which it is within hours so far. I didn't make it to this last huge rainfall event, which I was disappointed with myself in, because I would have really liked to see that. I am taking in indicators, or rather factors, of the plants growing bigger, which means that they're receiving enough nutrients they need to grow their roots that we need to help infiltrate the water into the soil and prevent using the overflow pipe if necessary. Because I would rather the water get filtered by those roots before it ends up feeding into the Centennial pond, in which the overflow pipe, whatever water is in that pipe is going towards. So plants, the speed of the infiltration, and I guess, yeah, those two so far, but I am working on a better system to assess the effectiveness of all of our rain gardens, including that one. Thank you.
No, thank you, Brittany, for at least taking the question. Karen Carrier says, thank you, Brittany. Awesome presentation and information. And then Marika from the Nashwaak Watershed Association says, great presentation. To what extent are you purchasing and selecting native species?
Thank you, Marika. So to the largest extent possible, we are very fortunate to have the Cornhill Nursery so close, because finding a local nursery that has a wide selection of native plants can be very difficult. So with our rain gardens, I think I have pretty much all of them have been native species so far. We planted also river mint that we harvested ourselves on some of the banks of the Petitcodiac and have been growing in the office. So that's also a thing. Can't get more native than that, right? But I have made serious efforts to do some research and work with the Cornhill Nursery to get as many native species as we can. in interchanging blooming times. So to make sure that something will always be blossoming in the gardens, which is very
good planning. Izzy Clarks asks, well, she says, go rain gardens for sure. And then she says, can you talk about your experience involving the community? Any advice for engaging youth and incorporating education into planting?
For sure. Thank you, Izzy. So me and Izzy actually went to university together, and I didn't know she was coming yesterday. So thank you so much for being here. So my experience involving the community has been just so positive. I have been so lucky to have good partnerships, good outreach opportunities to local schools, local groups like the Boys and Girls Club, and others like CAFE here, to engage youth and community in green infrastructure projects. It was harder this year because my advice for engaging youth and incorporating education into planting would just be to involve them in the planting itself. Nothing has inspired kids and adults who, you know, have a bit of youthful kidness in them, than getting shovels in their hands and plants in their possession to actually do some work themselves, because it is really fun. It's a great time to think about different questions and think about different processes. And so this year it was, we were very lucky to have some volunteers with our rain garden plantings, socially distant and with masks. So this has been the best educative and active learning opportunities that I've had the pleasure of doing, but also like doing different activities in outreach, like presentations, videos, has been very encouraging and so far very effective in involving the community and the youth in our area and our watershed here. Thank you for your question.
That's amazing when you can get some young minds in there, isn't it? Helen Wedge asks, are there any invasive plants to avoid?
Oh, thank you. I should have talked about this earlier. I am still learning a lot about invasive plant species. We have an incredible group, the New Brunswick Invasive Species Council of New Brunswick, here, who has an extensive knowledge that I am trying very actively to incorporate into our green infrastructure projects and rain garden planting. Two species that I've become more familiar with are fireweed and purple loosestrife. So we also have done some wetland assessments in our water quality monitoring project. So we've been trying to, I want to flip it over to show you my wetland plant wall, but maybe another time. We've been trying to identify as many species as we can in our wetland assessments to help our knowledge as well. So we've been finding purple loosestrife in our wetlands here around the city of Moncton and in the Petitcodiac Watershed. These invasive species will grow in rhizomes. So they have a horizontal growth. And in that rhizome that the shoots will come up, they continues going at a very accelerated rate. And it makes it very difficult to adapt, to restore different areas. I've been very, very fortunate not to have any purple loosestrife around areas that we have built rain gardens, but I do make sure to make an assessment of where they would be, try to identify all the plants around the area as I can. And yeah, if you have any more questions, there are a lot of different resources on invasive species. Your municipal parks, yes, but not really. I meant to say Parks Canada actually has an incredible resources on invasive plant species, since they actively try to restore their parks. Fundy National Park this year had a restoration project trying to cover and take out invasive plant species there that threaten to, you know, degrade the biodiversity in their parks. And yeah, but anyway, yeah, those are just some of them.
Hey, Brittany, I'm just gonna pop in and let you know that we have 4 minutes left until the break.
Yeah, I will keep you brief. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got we don't actually have that much left, so I think we have plenty of time. So just for everybody's information, I did put in the chat the New Brunswick Invasive Species website there in both French and English, so feel free to go and copy that into your resources pages. And then I did get a response from Keepang saying thank you for the clarification on that question on I guess I can't remember the word, what it was, how you're going to monitor the stuff. And then Alan Bray says, go Bob at Cornhill, because yes, I'm a favor of Bob at Cornhill too. So yeah, he's a great person.
Information.
Yeah. At Lauren from the KWRC says, great presentation. The KWRC, or the Kennebec Cases Watershed Restoration Committee, also connected with Cornhill Nursery for one of our rain garden plantings, and they were very helpful. So looking forward to planting more rain gardens in the future. So I will try to get that the Cornhill Nursery link into the chat box as soon as we finish off here as well. And then Ernest Ferguson says, interesting presentation and knowledgeable speaker. Thank you. So I think that's about it from my end in terms of questions. If anybody else has anything, feel free. We've got about 3 minutes left, so there is a little bit of time. Oh, here's something. Can you talk more about soil composition from Charles Le Gresley? Yes.
Yeah, hi, Charles. I will also be talking more about this in the breakout room a bit more because I kind of grazed over it briefly. Soil composition is definitely a great factor in creating a good rain garden. I've had wonderful success in that soil recipe that we received from EOS, but also it's very important in site analysis and assessment because the different kinds of soil composition. So if you have soil that is mostly sand, clay, or loam, I forget the third one. I am so sorry. I'm looking at Jill and nodding. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it's low.
It will change. So thank you, Bruce. This will change the capacity of an area to infiltrate the water itself without bringing in new soil, and also where the water will be lying. So clay. I'm very familiar with clay now. The water will stay on the top 2 layers, I think, of the water table there. So the top, like relatively, the 2 layers of soil. So it is a great soil composition for wetlands and other natural areas. But for starter rain gardens, it is a bit more difficult. So we do like to use, bring in soil that is created for the rain garden purposes. Yeah, I hope that helps. I'm happy to talk more about soil composition another time as well.
Excellent, thank you so much. That was very, very informative. And yes, you are a very knowledgeable speaker. So thank you very much for your time, Brittany.
Thanks, everyone.
I think we'll move on to, I'm just gonna, before we go to break, I'm gonna take the spotlight off Brittany here, and we're going to just speak briefly about what to expect when you come back. I think Serby has a slide about breakout rooms there. So we're just going to give a brief kind of overview of what a breakout room looks like if you aren't familiar with it. You'll see on the bottom of your screen when we come back from break that it'll say breakout rooms, and you will be able to choose the room to the presentation you want to be part of in discussion. When you're in the room, you do have the choice to leave that room and go and enter another room. So feel free to do that if you wish, if the presentation is not meeting your needs in any way, or if you would just want to pop into like another one during the time you have. And then we do have 2 English and 2 French presentations, and they will be repeated in the opposite language for the second session. So you're not going to miss out on any presentation that way. So yeah, so you have 2 choices for presentations if you want to. And yeah, so when you come back in 15 minutes, we will be able to open up the breakout rooms to you. All right, so we'll see you in 15 minutes.